Okay, we're going to talk about hard plastic bodies, how you select them, how to prepare and mount them, and various factors related to hard bodies. So first off, if you bought a ready set, and it probably came with a heavy detailed, scale body, which looked really cool with all the paint schemes and livery and decals and the mirrors and splitters and wing, so it looks really, really cool. And so very realistic looking detailed body, really good for display. So why would you choose a different body? So first off, the body can have a pretty large impact on handling of the car and performance, both due to, say, aerodynamics, rail handling, weight distribution balance, clearance. So definitely the body, changing the body can have a pretty big impact on how your car handles. Can go very quickly from a poor handling car to a very balanced handling car. The other thing is durability. So these highly detailed Kyosho bodies have things like mirrors or front splitters, wings, which will most likely get cracked in collisions with other cars, the rails. So very quickly your nice looking body will have a bunch of paint marks on it and broken pieces, so not too great. The other thing is visibility. So depending, of course, which color body you end up with, some of these can be very difficult to see on the track. For instance, this guy here, this dark gray, black, basically becomes invisible on the RCP. You can't even see it. For yourself and for other drivers, basically be like a ghost car, and people will just plow into it, and you'll have a hard time seeing. So visibility actually makes a big difference. Other reasons to change bodies, clearance for wheel offsets, depending on how wide you want to run front and rear wheels. Different bodies have different widths to accommodate that. So clearance to the wheel wells for the tires, suspension travel, other internal components like the disc damper, shocks, etc. The other thing is you can have multiples of the same body. If you want to tune performance aspects of the car, say mounted higher, lower, different aerodynamics or cutouts. So help you tune the car by changing the body. All right, so before we get too deep into the hard bodies, talk a little bit about Lexan bodies. So often when people get started, they'll see these very cool looking Lexan bodies, very lightweight, detailed, very similar to what you would see in larger scale RC. And oh, those are cool. Why can't I run those to start off with? So first off, depending on your club, and this is for the most part pretty consistent across clubs, that the Lexan bodies are generally only allowed in higher up classes, say modified or pan car, and those are really geared more towards experienced expert level drivers who can handle the difficulties associated with the Lexan body. So hard bodies are generally the rule for, say, box stock or a super stock class. So advantages of the hard body. First of all, the hard body is, of course, more rigid, and so will protect the chassis and your car internal components better. So if you get hit in a collision or you hit the rail, the hard body is fairly rigid and stiff and will absorb all of the impact instead of transferring it directly to your suspension or any other parts of the car. So more protection. Second is when hitting rails. So inevitably you're going to run into a rail and your car is going to hit it. So with the hard body, and definitely with the better smooth front hard bodies, the rigidity of the body will just glance off and you'll just keep going and you will only stick on the rail. So the Lexan bodies, they are softer, more flexible. Of course, you can put a bumper behind this, but they can, say, dig into the rail, catch on the rail, and so, you know, much less forgiving in terms of rail handling when you end up hitting the rail. The other advantage of the hard body is, since it is heavier, there can be a, you know, it definitely affects the car handling. And having a larger, a heavier body provides stability to the car. There's more rotational inertia and makes it a bit less reactive and easier to drive. Compared to a very lightweight Lexan body, which weighs very, very little. Of course, the con to the hard body being heavy is that can also raise the center of gravity and make your car prone more to traction roll. Of course, there are things you can do to alleviate that to some degree, putting in a Lexan windshield, a Lexan roof, for instance, and those all help to lower the CG. So, different factors when you want to choose a hard body. So the first probably is performance. So the body can have a pretty big impact on how the car handles in terms of, say, stability, oversteer, understeer, kind of a front or rear balance, you know, front rear cab, can have a different handling, aerodynamics, you know, is important, the overall weight of the body, and center of gravity, where it ends up. I mentioned wheel clearance, wheel and tire clearance, so ability to accommodate the offsets you want and clear the wheels, steering trouble, clearance to internal chassis components, if there are top shocks, tri-shocks, side shocks, disc damper, you know, transponder, receiver, things like that. What else? So rail handling. So as I mentioned before, having, you know, a good smooth front shape that can glance off of rails without digging in. It's a big factor. Durability and crash resistant. How is this thing going to stand up to being hit by other cars or hitting other cars without braking? And then lastly is, you know, availability. Is this body, you know, easily available? You know, Kyosho will often discontinue some bodies. For instance, you know, the Ferrari 458 was pretty popular and then discontinued, I think, due to a licensing issue. So can you get, you know, a body consistently and it's available without issue? So we're going to start off looking at the most popular bodies today, starting off with 98mm bodies. Most of you have probably seen this one somewhere. It's the Jomurema. This guy is very popular. It dominates most of the club racing scene. If you look at, you know, some of the races, it's basically a sea of Jomurema bodies out there. Several reasons why this body is so popular. First off, it's a very neutral handling body, very stable. It doesn't have any bad handling tendencies. It's also very heavy, which relatively heavy, which helps to stabilize the car. A fair amount of rotational inertia. And being so heavy, it's very durable. So the entire body all around the perimeter is very thick. Takes collisions well. I don't think I've ever seen one of these guys crack in a collision, so very durable, like a tank. The other thing is it handles rails really well. So the front is smooth, rounded, it glances off rails, there's really nothing to catch in the front or the sides. Also, it's a very wide and roomy body, so you can put it on a car, even with, you know, +3 offset wheels front and rear. There's no issues with clearance. You don't even need to trim the wheel arches at all, so plenty of room for wide offset wheels. It comes with a wing in stock form, which is actually fairly functional. And the nice thing about the wing is there's also 3 possible mounting positions. You can go more forward, it's kind of the most neutral handling, and then the rear position is probably the most aggressive position. Of course, you can get aftermarket wings, like Lexan wings, or even molded plastic wings for it. You can, of course, also get lighter windshields. So stock windshield is fairly heavy, rigid molded plastic. You can get a lighter Lexan windshield, and even PN makes a Lexan roof. So the entire roof is now Lexan, and that helps to lower the CG even more. It's a very easy to assemble body. So right out of the bag, you can take the body, glue on headlights, windshield, wing without any sort of extra trimming or reinforcement or adjustments, and you'll have a body very quickly that's fairly race-worthy. You don't need to make any unique adjustments to it. Put it on any car. For the most part, it will work. Not a lot of tuning, not a lot of preparation. This body just works for the most part on most cars. So the biggest downside maybe most people talk about is, looks. It really looks like a bar of soap. It doesn't look like a real car, which is unfortunately true for the most part. But with, paint and some decals, you can make it look fairly decent. The next popular race body we're going to talk about is the McLaren, the 12C GT3. This is actually used to be my favorite body. I still run it today in stock. It looks great. It looks like a real car. So advantages to this body: it's very, very lightweight. So it keeps the center of gravity low. Front end, once you trim down the splitter, handles the rails pretty well. I'll glance off them. It's kind of a cab forward, kind of more of a front steer bias car, but handles really well. Disadvantages to this body is it can be fragile since it's so lightweight. Over the years, I've added 3D printed reinforcements, glue, and even like nylon fabric patches in places to reinforce it. It can also accommodate most of the larger wheel offsets, +3 rears, +3 front, even with a little bit of trimming. So also a fairly roomy body, but it's definitely better looking than the Jomurema. Okay, the next body that's pretty popular still is the Audi R8. This is also a very lightweight body. Very short overhangs, and depending on the particular version, can be a little bit narrow. Also, it's due to the lightweight again, it can be a little fragile in areas. There are two different versions. So I think the 2015 version is narrow. I think mainly accommodates +1 front and rears. And if you get the wider version, I think this might be the wider version, the 2012 night version, can handle the +3 fronts and +3 rears. So some other bodies which are worth considering. I don't have them to show, but the Lexus SC430 is a good choice. It's has great mid-cap balance, a very low CG, and once you trim the front bumper, can handle the rails pretty well. Another one would be the new NSX for stock classes. It's a very light body, also good balance, but a little bit narrow. I think it can only accommodate +1 offsets front and rear. Good wall handling, maybe good for the smaller, H-face size kind of layouts. The last one to kind of mention would be the McLaren P1, maybe also good for smaller track layouts. Very low CG, also not too wide, but really good for smaller circuits, slower classes. So I want to cover some 102mm LM bodies. probably the most popular choices. So Mazda 787 shown here. It's pretty light, a little bit more aggressive in the steering. The front end can be fragile. You can get a 3D printed reinforcement to shore that up. The other 102mm body that's popular is the Sauber Mercedes C9, which is a little bit more balanced and a little bit more durable.